So, this video wasn't originally planned on. By that, I mean when I began the process of making my next few big videos, this was not accounted for. It wasn't until I was going through my Dragon's Return, Kuro Charm, and Demon Bell playthrough that the idea suddenly crossed my mind. Unlike all the other topics I had down, mini-bosses in Sekiro are a fascinating and strange bunch, playing by totally different rules than anything else within the game. And sometimes, these gigantic enemies can actually end up being harder and more challenging to take down than certain bosses. A lot of the time, it is not a question of proper combat skill, though that still is a gigantic factor when facing down with them, but rather how you approach their often uniquely designed arena and guards. Whereas bosses are mostly skill and technique based, mini-bosses are focused around the tactics. The other, maybe perhaps overlooked shinobi tools and skills at your disposal, and coming up with as many unique and interesting ways to dispose of them. So, as a result, me trying to tackle it with my usual boss approach of talking about the fight within a countdown format might be a bit odd. Also, just the fact that there are quite a few mini-bosses in the game, some of which are borrowing template designs. With this in mind, I decided to take a page out of my friend Ryan's book and challenge myself to talk about these enemies in a unique fashion, and try something different. So in this video, I will be discussing each and every mini-boss within the game in 10 words or less, as well as perhaps talk about the various aspects that go into a great or horrible mini-boss encounter. So with all that out of the way, let us get started. A nice, if easy, introduction to the concept. Most likely your introduction to Resurrection, which is neat. Come on and slam! And welcome to the jam! The moment where some strategy will need to be implemented. I sure do love necessary items to win! And just as a little subcategory, the underwater headless aren't as bad, mainly because you can actually fucking damage them normally, but it is underwater, movement and attack is different, and the fiend still sucks. I can still feel the penetration even now. Alcoholism, the true enemy all along. That is bullshit blazing! Great introduction to an enemy type common later on. We got quite the hype man here. Ass Kicker Supreme. All 7 are going straight up there. While you were failing, he studied World Longsword. Really unique and unorthodox way of victory. Straight up badass. Just one massive parry test with a bit of jumping. What if you went to heaven, but God said, terror? Wouldn't be hard if it wasn't for the arena. Basically the same as before, just better arena and everything. Same as the previous one, except it's only him. Literally the same, just with monkeys instead. The fabled destroyer of worlds. He is above this list. Shut up! I don't want to listen to your music! Kind of feel cheated by the ambush, not gonna lie. The calling of dogs as a gimmick is pretty cool. I sure do love running around in circles repeatedly. Well, someone clearly has been training for MLG. Actually, fuck the damage you receive from him. Cool reskin enemy with a nice twist. Too many bosses within one arena might be a bit much. And those are all my thoughts. So, what can we learn from all of this, and more importantly, what are my thoughts on the mini-bosses in Sekiro? Well, obviously as stated before, they go by a different rule set, testing other fundamental aspects of your kits and abilities instead of straight up combat. Now, that's not to say that combat is meaningless in these fights. If anything, for me, the mini-bosses with the most well-rounded combat and fun, as is usual, are the ones that scored the highest. It's just that mini-bosses are unique in how they can experiment and try out new ideas that may not exactly fit within the confines of a traditional boss. Let me word it like this. When we enter into the Witches of Hemwick arena and are greeted by the prospect of normal enemies, we sigh in disappointment, right? What a waste of data and space within this game that ends up offering nothing interesting or challenging, often just being straight up annoying. But when we crash into an arena in Sekiro and see a big guy guarded by a couple of other goons, we aren't annoyed, rather intrigued. A puzzle is presented before us. The target is located. We know what to do. The goalpost is beyond the fog, but the solution to the puzzle and how we solve it is up to us. Look through your items, your tools, think of the enemies before you, what you could do to get rid of the enemies around him in order to get an even footing. Or, alternatively, you could try and use, say, the Mountain Echo prosthetic to lure the monkeys and drunkard over to where you were, also driving the monkeys insane and causing a distraction, all while you sneak by, perhaps using a sugar, undetected. And from there, behind enemy lines, you could just let them kill each other and reduce the drunkard's health, get a backstab on the drunkard to make things easier on yourself, or maybe even use the bestowal ninjutsu to increase your damage on the foe. Another factor that goes into it is the combat system and mechanics of Sekiro. Simply put, while different, the mechanics and focus of Bloodborne just doesn't work for something like the witches. Awkward jumping, which involves running, stamina usage, planning your attacks out while also being aggressive, and semi-flash level design with not much room for elevation difference that you can take advantage of, combined with a boss that plays more like Where's Waldo, with diversions that can try and hurt you confined within a small arena, and the often not so intimidating bosses. But Sekiro can do something like that. Grappling hook points, ledges to hang off of, an actual jump button that can turn into a double jump off of walls and objects, no stamina bar, dashing, etc. Imagine, if you will, a Witches of Hemwick mini-boss in Sekiro. Located within a small village, your goal is to still find the witches and track them down, but they are hiding within the village, and it is your job to find them. Enemies that are resurrected upon death prowl the village, sometimes in groups, some looking out over cliff edges over the village, with a constant decrease and increase in elevation because of the mountain setting in Sekiro. Vantage points will of course be necessary to get a read of the village, underbush will be valuable to hide under, but there could also be other options such as houses to hide or go into, basements to crawl into like with the reservoir area, maybe a pond to dive under, or even a cave system with multiple passages to travel through, perhaps one of which leading you to them. I don't know. What I'm coming up with might not be the most well thought out example. Some of you could probably do better. But the point is apparent, right? The tools and kit you have, combined with the level design and mechanics of the game, allow for unique enemy encounters that we would either not have or just groan at. Things like the Armored Knight would never be allowed in Dark Souls or Bloodborne. A guy who just takes all of your hits and has to be killed specifically by falling? That's just stupid. And when they don't have anything in front of them, or alternatively, once they're all dealt with, it all just comes down to a traditional battle to the death, maybe with some spicings of variety depending on what you've done prior. In fact, the mini-bosses may perhaps be some of the biggest tests in the game, not just in difficulty with some of them, but also as literal tests. Those bosses like the Centipede Giraffes, while basic, really do hammer home the mechanics of Sekiro and ensure you know what you're doing and can learn. Everyone may hate the Shinobi Hunter for how much they died from it, and fair enough, but would you have learned the Makiri counter at all or any better if it wasn't for him? Now, that isn't to say all of these mini-bosses are perfect or even good, hell no. The Shichimen warriors, the Headless, the Bulls, and even Shirahagi are all miserable piles of trash that are slogs to go through. There are a number of factors to go into for each of them and why they failed. From obnoxious and even intrusive level design, hazard and enemy placement, power, attacks, movement, statuses, and even the necessary use of items to stand a chance, these are the prime examples of how sometimes just because you can try something doesn't mean you should. But I also feel that, in a way, all of these mini-bosses, even the bad ones, were necessary as a sort of testing grounds by FromSoft for their next big project. And with the radically different approach Elden Ring will be offering, there is no telling what's going to come next. Whether that's a thing to look forward to, or something to fear, there is no denying that Sekiro's mini-bosses and even Sekiro's design as a whole will certainly pave the way forward. They're the thugs you love to hate, and hate to love all at the exact same time. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and next time, we will truly know the meaning of hesitation.